Hey guys, it's Jeff Watson with FBS TV at our Skills Training Center here in Boise. I'm the new hire trainer for our location. Today we're actually going to be going over the standard operating procedure for a miter saw. Let's start cutting. Oh, hey guys, we forgot to talk about P.P.E. First and foremost, we want to make sure that you have your safety glasses with a rating of Z87.1. And I want to make sure that I have my hearing protection in too, right? What's that? No gloves? Absolutely no gloves. We're using a rotating blade, and that increases our chances of an entanglement danger when you're using gloves. So, no gloves. All right guys, so before we actually go to use this tool, we want to do a pre-use inspection on it. First and foremost, I want to make sure that I've killed power to this tool. I don't want to be looking at the blade and checking everything out if there's that off chance that it could start up, right? By doing that, I'm going to go ahead and just unplug it from the wall. Easiest and simplest way is unplugging it. The next, I can go through and add a lockout and tag out to it if I wanted to make sure that people didn't come by and accidentally turn it on, or I accidentally didn't flip the switch and turn it on while I'm looking at it. For today, only inspecting it, I'm going to go ahead and just have it unplugged from the wall. We want to check the cord first. We want to make sure that there's no nicks or frays going down it, so you can run your hand just down along the cord and make sure that there's nothing wrong with it. This seems like it's in good working condition. We can also, again, check those prongs to make sure that there's no damage on those as well. All right, guys, now that we've unplugged the saw, we can go ahead and start our inspection. In doing so, we want to make sure that it has its full movement and functions. Make sure that it slides freely up and down, back and forth. In doing so, we're also checking the guard, making sure that it is in place. If I pull it down and go back up and the guard doesn't slide back into place, then we know that the machine is deemed unfit for use. Next, we can go through and inspect the teeth of the blade. In doing so, making sure that it is, again, unplugged, no power going to it, and I can just kind of go through and be looking at the teeth. What we're looking for, again, is any pitch or resin that is on that teeth. Any amount of that building up on it is going to impede your cuts. So we're going through and checking the blades, making sure the teeth are not uneven or worn out in doing so. And again, checking that guard to make sure that comes back and is fully functioning. All right, guys, now that we've gone through and inspected this machine, we can go ahead and start talking about some general safety rules. My first and foremost is your proper hand placement. Anytime that you're setting up the saw, you want to always designate your cutting hand and your offhand. My cutting hand is going to be always placed up on the machine, and my offhand is going to be placed on the material I'm going to be cut. At no point should my offhand ever cross my body, and my trigger hand should never cross this side of my body. When I'm going through and making my cuts, I can go through, make a cut, use that material to bump it, and then using my trigger hand to grab that material off to the side. I never want to reach across that blade for any reason. Another key point about hand placement is making sure that no hands ever go into this area. All miter saws are going to have different colors. This one happens to be blue, but I never want my hands to be right here. All right, guys, now we can go ahead and talk about stance when operating this machine. In operating this machine, we want to make sure that we're not standing directly in front of the line of cut. In doing so, if a kickback were to happen and I were to be standing in front of it, this will pop back out at my chest or hit me in the face. Bad news bears. If I'm standing off to the side with a good stance, I will be able to control that kickback. When it happens and I'm cutting through my material, if this pops out at me, I'm actually able to take the force of the blow into my shoulders. When operating a miter saw, we need to know the potentials of a kickback. A saw kickback will happen when that blade no longer continues to turn freely. The full speed of the blade begins to bind up and rapidly slow down, or even comes to an unexpected stop. This could be due to a pinch blade shifting a material for an object in the wood like a nail, or the wood is too wet. That blade became sticky with pitch, the blade is out of balance or cracked, and so forth. This kickback jump happens instantaneously, much faster than a person could move out of the way. If the operator was standing directly in front of the saw, they could have the saw blade hit them, thus posing significant risk. It is essential that the operator stands to the side while operating so that if kickback does happen, the operator is not in the pathway of travel of the saw. Paying attention to the sound and feel of the saw is essential in predicting an impending kickback. If in doubt, abort the cut by taking your finger off the trigger and raising the blade up out of the work. All right, guys, I have my eyes and ears on. Let's start cutting. I want to make sure that my offhand is on my board stock material away from the fence. In case there is a kickback, I don't want the material to squish my fingers. I'm going to get a good stance, shoulder squared up with the machine. I want to make sure that this blade is fully reciprocating before I make contact with that material. I'm going to let that blade come to a complete stop before I lift it up, and then using my material to bump the part that I just cut. All right, now we want to start talking about angled cuts. When using a miter saw and making angled cuts, it's pretty easy. This little indicator is going to tell us at what measurement the cut will be made. So if I wanted to make a 45 degree, I can just untwist our locking mechanism and slide it all the way to the 45 degree slot until it locks in, and go ahead and tighten down our nut. Going through and making a cut, it's going to be the same as that straight cut we just showed you. Again, I want to line up with our saw so that I am not in direct line of the cut. Get a good stance and a good hand placement. My hand is up away from the fence. Before I make my cut, I want to make sure that the blade is fully reciprocating before I make contact with that wood, and then follow through with my cut, letting my blade come to a complete stop before I lift it up. Hey guys, let's go ahead and jump into tilt cuts. We want to keep the same rules as far as hand placement and our stance. It's going to be a little tricky though with our saw being tilted. It'll look weird, but I promise you the cuts are going to be the same. First thing we want to do is go ahead and remove our fences so we don't cut into those. Next thing we're going to do is loosen our arm, and then our little locking button down below. It'll be a little different on a couple other saws that we do. Go ahead and lock that back into place. And now we should be able to go ahead and make a cut. All right, guys, I have my eyes and ears on. I'm going to go ahead and make a tilt cut. Again, I want good hand placement off to the side and a good stance. I want to make sure I'm not going to get knocked off my feet in case something happens. When I'm about to make this cut, I want to make sure that my blade is fully reciprocating before making contact with the wood. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate the cut now, pushing the blade all the way through the material, letting the blade come to a complete stop before releasing it and grabbing my material. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into the compound cut. Compound cuts are actually a combination of a tilt and angled cut, mostly used when hanging up crown moldings. When doing a compound cut, it again is a combination of a tilt and an angle. So we're going to go ahead and get the saw set up for a compound cut. Now I have the saw set up for a compound cut. Again, we're going to be making sure that we have a good stance and good hand placement. My offhand is going to be a hold of the material we're about to cut, and my other hand is going to be on the trigger. You're going to be standing off to the side just a little bit, depending on at what angle you have it at. Again, we're making sure that we're out of the line of cut. I'm going to be standing just a little cockeyed. Again, making sure that my hand is on this material and away from the blade. I'll go ahead and make a compound cut, letting the blade come to a complete stop before I lift it up and grab my material. All right, guys, so that was your basic SOP on how to use a miter saw. We went ahead and covered the basics, the PPE that you're going to be needing when operating the tool. We also went and talked about some general safety rules as far as hand placement and your stance to help with kickback. Anytime that we're using this tool, we want to again making sure that that blade is fully reciprocating before you make contact with the material, and that it comes to a complete stop before you go in and grab your material out. Also, we want to make sure that you guys are hitting the like button, smashing the subscribe button, and then checking out the other videos on FBS TV and giving those a like as well.